Some days feel like a race I can never win. No matter how early I wake up, time slips away, and my to-do list only grows longer. But through every struggle, I find small victories that keep me going. Welcome to the Fluent Storybook. Here, we improve English through storytelling. Listen, enjoy, and learn as we take you through stories that make English fun and easy to understand. So today I'm going to share my own personal story with you. So let's start. The alarm rings. It's loud, but my body refuses to move. I reach out and press the snooze button. Just 5 more minutes, I tell myself. But 5 minutes turn into 10, then 15. Before I know it, I'm late again. I jump out of bed in a panic. My heart races as I check the time. I was supposed to wake up earlier to practice my English, but now there is no time. I rush to the bathroom, brush my teeth quickly, and splash cold water on my face. My mind is still sleepy, and my thoughts feel slow. As I get dressed, I remember that today is an important day. At work, I have to speak in English during a meeting. Just the thought of it makes my stomach twist. I want to practice a little before I leave home, but my morning is already chaotic. I head to the kitchen, where my family is already having breakfast. They talk and laugh, and I try to join the conversation in English. I open my mouth to speak, but the words don't come out easily. My brain feels frozen, like it is still half asleep. I finally say something, but my sentence is not perfect. I mix up the words, and my younger sibling giggles. It is a small laugh, but it makes me feel self-conscious. I know my family supports me, but every mistake reminds me that I still have a long way to go. I take a deep breath and try again. This time I say my sentence more clearly. My mom nods, understanding what I mean. It's a small victory, but it gives me hope. As I eat my breakfast, I try to think in English. I look at my coffee and say to myself, this coffee is hot. I am drinking coffee. It sounds so simple, but in my mind, even forming small sentences takes effort. Sometimes I struggle to find the right words. I know them, but when I try to say them out loud, I hesitate. I decide to practice by saying my morning routine in English. I am brushing my teeth. I am washing my face. I am putting on my shoes. It feels silly, but I know this is helping me build confidence. As I leave the house, I whisper to myself, today, I will speak English with confidence. I know it won't be perfect, but I am trying. When I get to the bus stop, I see a few people waiting. A man next to me is speaking on the phone in English. His words flow so naturally. I listen carefully, trying to understand everything he says. I wonder if I will ever speak like that. Will English ever feel easy for me? Right now, it still feels like a challenge. The bus arrives, and I step inside. I need to ask the driver a question, but I hesitate. What if I say something wrong? What if I mispronounce a word? I take a deep breath and say, does this bus go to Main Street? The driver nods and replies, yes, it does. I feel a small sense of relief. I spoke in English, and I was understood. It might be a simple sentence, but for me, it is a big step. Struggling to find the right words when talking to people. On the bus, I see one of my coworkers. She is friendly, and I know she would love to have a conversation. I want to talk to her, but my mind starts overthinking. What should I say? How should I start? What if I make a mistake? I finally gather my courage and say, good morning. How are you? She smiles and replies, I'm good. How about you? I feel happy that I started the conversation, but when she continues talking, I struggle to keep up. She speaks fast, and I only understand half of what she says. I nod and smile, hoping she doesn't notice my confusion. I want to reply in full sentences, but I can't find the right words fast enough. Instead, I say short phrases like, yes, that's nice, and oh, really? I feel frustrated with myself. I know more words than this, but in the moment, I freeze. By the time we reach work, I feel a mix of emotions. I am proud that I spoke, but I also wish I could say more. Even though mornings are hard, I remind myself that I am improving. A few months ago, I was too afraid to even say good morning to someone. Now, I am starting small conversations. I know my English is not perfect yet, but I also know that every small effort adds up. Speaking English in the morning is a challenge, but I will keep trying. One day, I will wake up and realize that it no longer feels like a struggle. As I step off the bus and walk toward my workplace, my heart beats faster. I am not nervous because of my job. I know my tasks well. I am nervous because today, like every other day, I will have to speak English. The morning struggle of finding words and speaking clearly is not over yet. At work, there are even more challenges. Conversations are faster, expectations are higher, and I don't have time to think too long before I speak. I enter the office and see my coworkers chatting near the coffee machine. They talk so easily, laughing and using expressions I don't fully understand. I want to join them, but my mind holds me back. I stand near them, smiling politely, but I don't say much. I rehearse sentences in my head, but by the time I am ready to speak, the conversation has already moved on. One of my coworkers, Sarah, turns to me and says, "Hey, how was your weekend?" This is a simple question, but suddenly my mind goes blank. I know what I did over the weekend, but how do I say it in English? I quickly try to translate my thoughts, but I struggle to put them into words. I finally say, "Good. I, go to park with friends." I immediately realize my mistake. It should be, "I went to the park with my friends." But it's too late. Sarah smiles kindly and says, "That sounds fun." She doesn't correct me, but I can tell she noticed. I feel a little embarrassed. Why can't I speak as easily as everyone else? As I sit at my desk, I think about my English. I know I have improved, but moments like this make me feel like I still have a long way to go. I've been working at this company for months, but I still feel nervous speaking to my coworkers. I listen more than I speak because I am afraid of making mistakes. Sometimes during lunch breaks, my coworkers talk about movies, travel, or funny stories from their lives. I want to join the conversation, but I hesitate. What if I can't find the right words? What if I mispronounce something and they laugh? So instead of speaking, I just nod and say, "Yeah, wow, and really?" I know this is not enough to truly be part of the conversation, but at least it keeps me from feeling embarrassed. Today, I have to speak in a meeting. My manager asked me to give a short update about my work. It's not a long presentation, just a few sentences. But still, my hands feel cold and my stomach feels tight. Before the meeting, I write down what I want to say. I practice in my head over and over. This week, I finished the report. I am working on the new project now. It will be ready by Friday. It sounds simple, but when the meeting starts, my nerves take over. I hear my coworkers speaking so naturally. They use words I don't know, and they speak so fast. I start to doubt myself. When it's my turn, my voice feels small. This week, I finished the report. And, I'm working on, the project. I feel my face getting warm. My words are not smooth. I can see some people waiting for me to finish. I rush through my last sentence and quickly look down at my notebook. Nobody says anything bad. The meeting continues. But inside, I feel disappointed in myself. After work, I stop by a coffee shop to buy a drink. There is a long line, so I have time to prepare my order in my head. I tell myself, I will order in a full sentence. I won't just say coffee. I will say it correctly. When it's my turn, the cashier smiles and says, "Hi, what can I get for you?" I try to speak confidently. "Can I have a small coffee with milk, please?" She nods and asks, "Hot or iced?" I was not ready for this question. My mind freezes for a second. Hot." She types on the register. "That'll be $3.50. Do you want anything else?" I quickly shake my head and pay. I know I ordered correctly, but even a small moment like this makes me nervous. As I walk home, I think about all the times I struggled today. Speaking English at work, talking in casual situations, trying to express myself. It all feels like an uphill battle. But then I remind myself of something important. I spoke in English today. Even though I was nervous, I still answered Sarah's question. I still gave my update in the meeting. I still ordered my coffee correctly. I made mistakes, but I didn't run away from speaking. That means I am improving. I know my English will not be perfect overnight. But if I keep speaking, keep practicing, and keep trying, one day I won't feel nervous anymore. Tomorrow I will wake up and try again. As I walk home from work, my mind replays all the moments I struggled to speak English today. The nervous feeling I had in the office, the hesitation during lunch breaks, the awkward pauses in the meeting. All of it weighs on me. It's not that I don't know English. I have studied it for years. I watch movies, read articles, and even practice speaking at home. But when it comes to real conversations, something always holds me back. The fear of making mistakes is always there, sitting in the back of my mind like a shadow. Every time I open my mouth to speak, a small voice whispers, "What if you say the wrong word? What if they don't understand you? What if they laugh?" These thoughts slow me down, making me second-guess every sentence before I even say it. And when I do make a mistake, it stays in my head for hours, sometimes even days. Tonight, as I eat dinner, I think about all the times I have felt embarrassed because of my English. Some moments were small, barely noticeable to others, but to me, they felt huge. Others were bigger, moments that made me want to hide and never speak English again. But deep down, I know that if I want to improve, I have to face these moments, even if they make me uncomfortable. Recalling the first time I felt truly embarrassed while speaking English. One of the most embarrassing moments happened a few months ago when I was at the grocery store. I had just moved to a new apartment and needed to buy some basic things: milk, bread, eggs, and rice. I was nervous because I had to speak English to the cashier, but I told myself that I knew enough to handle a simple shopping trip. When it was my turn to pay, the cashier smiled at me and said something quickly. I didn't catch all the words, but I heard "bag" at the end. I assumed she was asking if I needed a bag, so I confidently said, "Yes, I bring my own." She gave me a confused look. I immediately felt my stomach drop. Did I say something wrong? She repeated the question, a little slower this time. "Would you like a paper or plastic bags?" That's when I realized my mistake. She wasn't asking if I brought my own bag. She was asking which type of bag I wanted. My face turned red. I felt so foolish for misunderstanding such a simple question. Instead of calmly correcting myself, I panicked. I wanted to fix my mistake quickly, so I blurted out, "Yes, please." Now she looked even more confused. "Paper or plastic?" she asked again. I felt everyone in line staring at me. My palms were sweaty, and my mind felt blank. Why was this so difficult? Finally, I forced myself to say, "Paper, please." The cashier nodded and packed my groceries. She didn't seem upset or annoyed, but I walked out of the store feeling humiliated. For the rest of the day, I kept replaying the moment in my head. Why did I say that? Why didn't I just ask her to repeat? Why couldn't I think faster? That moment made me afraid of small conversations in English. I started avoiding situations where I had to talk to strangers. If I needed something at a store, I would try to find it myself instead of asking for help. If someone spoke to me, I would just smile and nod, hoping they wouldn't ask me a question. It was easier to stay quiet than to risk making another mistake. The embarrassment wasn't just with strangers. At work, with friends, and in everyday life, I constantly struggled to keep up with conversations. The worst part wasn't just making mistakes. It was feeling like I didn't belong in conversations at all. At work, my coworkers would talk about their weekend plans, their families, or funny things that happened during the day. I wanted to join in, but I was always afraid of saying something wrong. Sometimes, I would start a sentence but stop halfway because I wasn't sure if I was saying it correctly. Other times, I would listen but not understand everything, so I wouldn't respond. One time, my coworkers were talking about a funny TV show. They were laughing, making jokes, and using words I didn't recognize. I wanted to ask, "What does that mean?" But I was too shy. I didn't want to slow down the conversation or seem like I didn't understand. So I just smiled and nodded, pretending I knew what they were talking about. Then, one of my coworkers turned to me and said, "What do you think?" I panicked. I had no idea what to say. I didn't know enough about the show to give an opinion. Instead of admitting that I didn't understand, I just laughed nervously and said, "Yeah, that's funny." They all looked at me confused. One of them said, "Wait, but you haven't seen it, right?" I felt so embarrassed. They had realized that I was just pretending to understand. I quickly admitted, "No, I haven't seen it." They were nice about it, but I still felt ashamed. I wished I had just been honest from the start. But because I was so afraid of making mistakes, I ended up embarrassing myself even more. After so many moments like these, I started to realize something important. Avoiding mistakes wasn't helping me. In fact, it was making my English worse. The more I avoided speaking, the less practice I got. The less practice I got, the more nervous I became. It was a cycle that was holding me back. I decided that I had to change my mindset. I had to accept that making mistakes was part of the process. Every fluent English speaker had made mistakes before. The only difference was that they kept speaking, even when they got embarrassed. So I made a promise to myself. I would stop running away from conversations. I would speak, even if I made mistakes. I would ask questions, even if I felt silly. I would be honest when I didn't understand something. The next time I went to a store, I challenged myself to speak slowly and clearly. When the cashier asked, "Do you want a receipt?" I didn't panic. Instead of guessing, I took a deep breath and asked, "Can you repeat that?" She repeated the question, and this time I understood. I answered confidently, "No, thank you." It was such a small moment, but it felt like a victory. At work, I started speaking up more. If I didn't know a word, I asked. If I made a mistake, I didn't let it stop me. One day, I even laughed at my own mistake. I had meant to say, "I need a break," but I accidentally said, "I need a break." My coworker smiled and said, "Unless you're driving, I think you mean break." Instead of feeling embarrassed, I laughed and said, "Oops. Yes, I need a break." That moment changed something in me. I realized that making mistakes wasn't the end of the world. People didn't judge me as much as I thought they would. In fact, many people appreciated that I was trying my best. Slowly, I stopped feeling so embarrassed about my English. I still made mistakes, but now, I saw them as part of my learning journey. Instead of avoiding conversations, I embraced them. Instead of feeling ashamed, I felt proud that I was improving. Every mistake was a step forward. Every embarrassing moment was a lesson. And every time I spoke English, no matter how imperfectly, I was getting better. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about all the mistakes I had made in English. The cashier at the store, the awkward moments at work, the times I had nodded along even when I didn't understand a conversation. These moments used to make me feel small, like I would never be good enough. But something was different now. Instead of feeling defeated, I felt determined. I had spent too long running away from my mistakes. Avoiding conversations, staying silent, and pretending to understand had only made my English worse. I didn't want to live in fear of speaking anymore. I wanted to improve, but I also knew that I couldn't change everything overnight. I had to start small. I turned off the light and made a promise to myself. Every day, I would do something, no matter how small, to improve my English. The next morning, as I got ready for work, I tried something new. Instead of letting my thoughts run in my native language, I forced myself to think in English. It was difficult at first. My mind wanted to switch back to my first language, but I kept bringing it back to English. When I picked up my toothbrush, I said to myself, "Okay, now I'm brushing my teeth." When I poured my coffee, I whispered, "This coffee smells so good." I described everything I did in simple English, as if I were narrating my own life. It felt a little strange, but it helped. Speaking English out loud, even just to myself, made me feel more comfortable with the language. I wasn't worried about making mistakes because no one was listening. As I walked to work, I continued the practice in my head. I looked around and described what I saw. The sky is cloudy today. The air feels cold. That man is walking his dog. It was such a simple exercise, but it made English feel more natural to me. That day, during lunch, I took it a step further. Instead of eating in silence, I whispered a few sentences to myself. "This food tastes delicious. I like this sandwich. Maybe tomorrow I will try something different." No one heard me, but I felt a sense of accomplishment. I was practicing even in the smallest ways. That night, I thought about another small way I could practice English. I had always used my phone in my native language, but what if I changed the settings to English? It seemed like a simple thing, but I knew it would help expose me to more English words every day. I went to my phone settings and switched the language. Suddenly, everything was in English: my messages, my notifications, even my alarm clock. At first, it felt strange. I had to think a little harder to navigate my phone. But after a few days, I realized I was learning new words without even trying. The next thing I did was change my social media habits. Normally, I followed pages and accounts in my native language, but now I started following English-speaking pages. I found news sites, language learning accounts, and even some American influencers. Whenever I scrolled through my feed, I saw English sentences. At first, I didn't understand everything, but I didn't let that stop me. If I saw a new word, I looked it up. If I didn't understand a sentence, I read it again slowly. I also started using language learning apps for just a few minutes every day. I didn't try to do too much at once. I just made it a small daily habit. 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. Over time, these little moments added up. One evening, after another long day of work, I sat on my couch and turned on the TV. Normally, I would watch shows in my native language because it was relaxing. But tonight, I decided to do something different. I picked an American TV show with subtitles. At first, it was difficult. The actors spoke too fast, and I had trouble keeping up. But I reminded myself that I didn't have to understand everything. I just had to listen. I started by reading the subtitles and listening at the same time. If I didn't understand something, I paused and repeated the sentence. After a few days, I noticed that my brain was starting to pick up common phrases. I could guess the meaning of some words just from hearing them in different situations. I also began listening to English podcasts on my way to work. At first, I chose podcasts for English learners because they spoke slowly and clearly. But as I got better, I started listening to real conversations, interviews, storytelling, and even comedy shows. It became a fun way to learn. I wasn't sitting down and studying grammar rules. I was just exposing myself to English in an enjoyable way. As I got more comfortable listening to English, I knew the next step was speaking. I had to start using English in real conversations, not just in my head. So I gave myself small challenges every day. The first challenge was at the coffee shop. Normally, I would just say, "Coffee, please," to keep things simple. But this time, I forced myself to say a full sentence. "Can I have a medium coffee with milk, please?" It was such a small thing, but I felt proud of myself. The next day, I challenged myself to ask a coworker a question. Instead of just saying, "Hello," I asked, "How was your weekend?" When they responded, I made sure to listen carefully and ask a follow-up question. Day by day, I pushed myself a little more. I ordered food in English. I asked for directions. I even tried small conversations with strangers. Some days were easier than others. Sometimes I still made mistakes. But instead of feeling embarrassed, I reminded myself that mistakes were part of learning. One evening, I was on the phone with customer service. Normally, phone calls in English made me nervous, but I decided to stay calm and take my time. The person on the other end spoke quickly. I didn't understand everything, but instead of panicking, I politely said, "Can you repeat that, please?" They slowed down and explained again. I answered the questions, and by the end of the call, I had solved my problem, all in English. When I hung up, I felt a wave of happiness. Just a few months ago, I would have been too scared to even make that call. Now I had done it without freezing up. Looking back, I realized that improving my English didn't happen in one big moment. It happened in small steps, little by little, every single day. Talking to myself in English, changing my phone settings, following English accounts online, listening to podcasts, speaking up more at work, ordering food in full sentences, making small conversations. Each of these things seemed small on its own, but together they made a huge difference. The most important lesson I learned was that progress comes from practice, not from being perfect. I used to wait until I felt ready to speak English, but now I knew that I would never feel completely ready. I had to start where I was, make mistakes, and learn from them. And with every small step, I felt more confident. I wasn't just learning English anymore, I was living it. One evening, as I sat in my small apartment, I reflected on my journey. Months ago, speaking English had felt like an impossible challenge. Every conversation was a struggle. Every mistake felt like a failure, and every interaction in English drained my confidence. But now something was different. I wasn't perfect, and I still made mistakes, but I no longer let those mistakes control me. I had been practicing in small ways every day, pushing myself little by little, and now I could see the results. I no longer hesitated before ordering my food in English. I no longer avoided conversations at work. And most importantly, I no longer felt like I had to be perfect to speak. I had accepted that learning a language was a journey, and I was finally starting to enjoy the ride. But I wasn't done yet. I still had one final challenge to face, speaking in front of a group. At work, my manager announced that we would have a team meeting the following week. Everyone would have to share an update about their projects. Normally, I would have stayed silent, letting others do the talking while I avoided eye contact. But this time I made a decision. I was going to speak. The thought of it made my heart pound. I still remembered how nervous I felt when speaking English in public, how my hands would sweat, and how my words would get stuck in my throat. But I reminded myself of how far I had come. I prepared for the meeting carefully. I wrote down my main points, practiced in front of a mirror, and even recorded myself speaking so I could hear my own pronunciation. It wasn't perfect, but I wasn't aiming for perfection. I just wanted to do my best. When the day of the meeting arrived, I felt the familiar nervousness creeping in. My palms were sweaty, and my heart was racing. But I took a deep breath and told myself, I can do this. I had been practicing for this moment. When my turn came, I stood up, my hands gripping the edge of the table. I looked around at my co-workers and forced myself to smile. "Good morning, everyone," I started, and to my surprise, my voice was steady. I spoke slowly and clearly, remembering the things I had practiced. I didn't rush, and I didn't let my fear take over. And then something amazing happened. People were listening to me. They nodded, they smiled, and they responded to what I was saying. No one laughed at my mistakes. No one judged my accent. They simply listened. When I finished, my manager said, "Great job. That was very clear." I couldn't believe it. I had spoken in a meeting, something I never thought I would be able to do. Walking back to my seat, I felt something new, pride. I had faced my fear, and I had won. After that meeting, something inside me changed. I realized that confidence wasn't about being perfect. It was about trying. I started speaking up more at work. I joined conversations instead of avoiding them. If I didn't know a word, I asked. If I made a mistake, I laughed it off and corrected myself. One day, during lunch, a coworker invited me to join a small group discussion. Normally, I would have made an excuse and left. But this time I stayed. At first, I just listened. The conversation moved fast, and there were words I didn't understand. But instead of feeling discouraged, I paid attention to the way they spoke. I noticed the way they used common phrases, the way they reacted, the way they laughed. And then when there was a pause, I jumped in. It was just a small comment, a simple sentence about something funny that had happened that morning. But my co-workers laughed, and suddenly I felt like I belonged. That moment gave me the confidence to keep going. I started challenging myself to have at least one real conversation in English every day. It didn't matter if it was a short talk with a stranger, a chat with a coworker, or a phone call. I just needed to speak. Each conversation built my confidence a little more. One of the biggest lessons I learned on my journey was that mistakes are part of learning. For so long, I had been afraid of making mistakes in English. I thought people would laugh at me or judge me. But the truth was, most people didn't care. I realized this when I made a mistake in a conversation with my manager. I was trying to explain a situation, and I used the wrong tense. I caught myself halfway through and hesitated, expecting an awkward reaction. But my manager just smiled and said, "Oh, you mean last week, right?" He corrected me in such a natural way that I didn't feel embarrassed at all. In fact, I felt grateful because now I knew the right way to say it. From that moment on, I stopped being afraid of mistakes. Instead of seeing them as failures, I saw them as lessons. If I made a mistake, I corrected myself and moved on. If I didn't know a word, I asked. If I said something wrong, I laughed and tried again. This shift in mindset changed everything. One evening, I was sitting at a cafe, sipping my coffee and scrolling through my phone. I came across an old message I had sent to a friend months ago. It was full of simple, broken English. I smiled as I read it, realizing how much I had improved. I thought about all the things I could do now that I couldn't do before. I could have full conversations in English without feeling terrified. I could express my thoughts without struggling for words. I could understand movies and podcasts better. I could speak in meetings without feeling frozen. Most importantly, I no longer felt like English was a wall separating me from the world. I had broken through that wall, step by step, small victory by small victory. And I knew that this was just the beginning. I still had more to learn. There were still words I didn't know, grammar rules I needed to practice, and moments when I would struggle. But I wasn't afraid anymore, because I knew that learning English wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up, trying, and growing a little more every day. I had come a long way from the days of waking up late, feeling nervous at work and avoiding conversations. Now I face my struggles with confidence. I was no longer just learning English, I was living it, and that made all the difference. Looking back, I realized that learning English was never just about memorizing words or perfecting grammar. It was about overcoming my fears, breaking out of my comfort zone, and believing in myself. In the beginning, I struggled. Every morning felt like a battle. Every conversation felt like a test, and every mistake felt like a failure. I doubted myself so many times. There were moments when I wanted to give up, when I thought I would never be good enough. But I kept going. I practiced in small ways every day, even when I felt discouraged. I pushed myself to speak, even when I was nervous. I made mistakes, but instead of letting them hold me back, I used them to learn. And slowly, everything changed. Now I can speak English with confidence. I can have conversations without fear. I can express my thoughts and connect with people in a way I never could before. But the most important change? I no longer see English as something impossible. I know that I will always keep learning, and that's okay. Language is a journey, not a destination. If you're struggling with English, just remember, progress is made one step at a time. Don't wait for perfection. Don't let fear stop you. Just start. Speak a little today and a little more tomorrow. Learn from your mistakes and keep moving forward. Because one day, you'll look back, just like I did, and realize that you've come so much farther than you ever imagined.